Ever snapped at your child and thought, why did I do that? That is not the parent I want to be. Or you watched your children lose it over something seemingly small and wondered, what is actually going on here? Turns out behaviour is never random. There's always something happening beneath it, and it always makes sense. I'm Jackie Hall, and this is Beneath Behaviour, where we break down stress, reactions, and get to the heart of why we all do the things we do. We'll have real conversations, find real solutions, and have absolutely no judgment. Let's talk.
Understanding you, understanding them, understanding you. You can rise, 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 see beyond the fight. There's a story underneath, hidden in the light. Beneath Behaviour podcast, there's more to see.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Beneath Behaviour podcast, where we're always looking to understand what's going on underneath our emotions and underneath our behaviours. And we do this particularly in the context of parenting, whether we're looking at a parent and their emotions and how they're responding to the different challenges that they face in parenting, or whether we're jumping into the world of a child and trying to make sense of their behaviour and their emotions, always asking the question, what must they be thinking to be feeling this way or to be behaving this way? Or what must I be thinking to be feeling this way and behaving this way? Now, today's topic is actually going to run over 2 episodes, and that's because it's quite a complex topic, and it's one that's really quite popular when we're supporting parents, particularly when we're supporting parents in our autism program. And that topic is meltdowns. Now, the reason why we're going to do this over 2 episodes is because many parents come to me and they say, my child is doing X, Y, and Z when they're having a meltdown. What do I do? And we need to look at that issue or that challenge from 2 different perspectives. We need to look at from the perspective of what do I do in that moment, which is mostly what parents are wanting, is those in the moment tools. And they're really important that you know what to do and what not to do when your child is in a full-blown meltdown. But what's equally and perhaps even more important is what do I do outside of that moment so that I can prevent those meltdowns from happening in the first place. So this first episode in this 2-part series is going to be about what do we do out of context, outside of those meltdowns, in the hope that we can start to prevent them from happening in the first place, or reduce the longevity of them, or reduce the amount of times they happen in the first place. And to do that, we're going to use my super framework. And I spoke about this specifically in episode 9. The whole episode was about this super framework. So if you want more context on what that's about, you can go to that episode and have a look at it, or listen to it if you're listening on a podcast. And so we're going to look at it from the super perspective, and then we're going to look at those in the moment strategies. But before we get into those, I want to start by kind of giving you an understanding of what a meltdown is in the first place. We need to kind of differentiate between a meltdown, a tantrum, and a shutdown, because they're all slightly different and they're going to have different approaches. We need to look at it by... So the first thing that we need to do when we're looking at whether it's a meltdown, shutdown, or tantrum is think about it from a nervous system perspective. Now, all of our nervous systems are wired to survive. We're always trying to perceive our environment through our 5 senses, see it, hear it, touch it, taste it, smell it, evaluate what we're getting through that environment, and ascertain, what do we do? What is this? Have I seen it before? Do I have a reference point? Do I have an opinion about it? What do I do in order to maintain safety and security and survival? So as parents, we've got to be looking at this from a curiosity perspective to understand how your child is perceiving things in order to be feeling the way that they are. And that can be really hard for parents, because often what we see is the behavior that can be quite destructive, or can be quite rude or aggressive, or morally inappropriate in some way. And as parents, we want to put a stop to that. We want to kind of tell our child, like, that's not okay. We need to stop that behavior. Or because of what's going on for us, we just want a solution to it. So we can go into a bit of a panic about it whenever we see our child behave the way that they are. So this is why we want to use that super framework, so we can be looking at things from a completely different perspective when we are seeing our child have these meltdowns. Now, let's have a look at the difference between what a meltdown is, what a tantrum is, and what a shutdown is from the survival perspective. Now, firstly, when we're thinking about a tantrum, tantrums are something that happen when the logic and reasoning part of the brain is very much online. The child is deliberately trying to behave the way that they are in order to get what they want or to avoid something that they don't want. And you will hear that the way that they speak is a little bit more coherent than a meltdown. You will see them assessing what you're saying, the response to their behavior in order to adjust their behavior to continue to get what they want. You can see that the behavior is a lot more deliberate. They're thinking about what's happening. They're thinking about their response to what's happening. Their words are a lot more thought out in order to get the result that they're wanting. So you can see that even though they might be angry, even though they might be acting out, you're seeing that done in a more deliberate way. Now, meltdowns, on the other hand, are not like that. Those cognitions, those thought processes aren't online. So whenever we are in survival mode, when we're in fight or flight or shutdown, what's happened is the brain has perceived this situation as a threat. So your child may have built up these emotions to the point where they're seeing this current situation as a threat, and the survival system has to decide, how am I best going to survive? And it has kind of built-in default mechanisms that says, in this moment, the best way to survive is to fight. The best way to survive is to run away, or the best way to survive is to shut down and play dead. So they're very primitive responses the nervous system has. And as part of responding this way, they end up shutting down the logical part of the brain. It's not a time to analyze the situation. So if you think about it in terms of being chased by a lion, we can understand that we go into this survival mode. If we're being chased by a lion, we're not sitting here analyzing how quickly we can run to a tree and calculating how fast we can get to that tree versus how fast the lion is. We don't have time for any of that. We need to act, and we need to act now. And so part of the nervous system's response to threat, it will actually shut down that logical reasoning part of the brain and just act the way it thinks it needs to in that moment to get the best outcome for survival. So it doesn't matter whether that event is real or imagined, the body can go into that response. It's using a different part of the brain than that logic and reasoning. So this is really important, because sometimes what can start out as a tantrum can wind up into a meltdown. So they can be deliberately responding to something that they don't like, or trying to get their way, getting towards what they do want. And then they're not successful. And the harder they try, the further away they are from it. And then all of a sudden it starts to become a threat to them and their survival system, and their survival system goes into meltdown. So a tantrum can lead into a meltdown, and that's where they're not thinking straight. So all of your logic and reasoning and trying to make sense of the situation is no longer going to work in that scenario, because the thinking side of the brain has shut down. And in fact, it can actually escalate your child even further. And we're going to talk about that more in the second part of this series, where we talk about what to do and what not to do in the moment. But at the moment, we just need to understand that when they're in that meltdown stage, those cognitions are not online, and we need to be responding to the nervous system, not appealing to their logic and reasoning skills. So that meltdown is cognitions offline, they're in emotional overload, their body is in this fight or flight response that is enabling them to try and feel safe again, or to control the situation so that they can feel safe again. So what we want to be doing is helping the child to feel safe in this moment. We're helping their nervous system to regulate into this moment, and not using those logic and reasoning skills. Now, a shutdown, on the other hand, is where the body's felt like, or the survival brain has felt like, the best chance of survival is to completely shut down. So you might find that your child doesn't act out aggressively or doesn't go into fight mode They don't go into flight mode. They just go into full shutdown. It's another response in the body, another survival response in the body to help the child to deal with that situation. So again, we're working on helping them regulate their nervous system. So what can we do about this? What can we do to help the child to navigate their way through life so that they're not having to respond in this fight, flight, or shutdown response in the first place? To do this, we need to look at it from many different perspectives, and that's why we bring our SUPER framework into conversation. SUPER stands for self-awareness, understanding, prepare, plan, teach, environment and culture, and relationships. All 5 of those are going to integrate into the solution to helping your child to prevent meltdowns in the first place. The first one is self-awareness. I've spoken quite a bit about that on this podcast, where we're looking at what must I be thinking to be feeling the way that I am, to be behaving the way that I am as a parent. So we looked at in episode 2, we looked at the stressful thinking lenses, right versus wrong, missing out, could have, should have, worthless. I won't go over them today because it's in other episodes. It's in lots of other episodes, 2, 3, 5. Have a look at those. But it's really about how we're thinking about that situation, the narrative that we run that causes our own stress. Now, when a parent is watching their child or experiencing their child having a meltdown, sometimes we do go into this panic mode. I need to stop them. I need to teach them that this is not okay. I need to, control the situation, and then I'll panic if I can't control the situation, or I worry that they're going to do this forever. Our whole narrative can get so caught up that you're having your own reactions in reaction to your child's reaction that are preventing you from being able to jump out of the world of you and jump into the world of your child. So what you're needing to do in the self-awareness element is kind of reflect upon, how have I been when my child is having a meltdown? What's going on for me? What are some of my responses? What are some of my behaviors when my child is behaving the way that they are? Because sometimes the way a parent is responding can escalate a child, which we may not be aware of. They can feed off your energies. So sometimes they can feel what's going on for you, and that can also create a meltdown for them, because they may feel unsafe in that environment when they can feel you're escalating in certain ways. And this is in no way blame, okay? So we're not trying to tell parents that they're the cause of their child's meltdowns. Remember, SUPER, it is one aspect that we're looking at as a potential place that we need to explore options for what can change in order to help your child to alleviate those meltdowns. So one perspective is looking at self-awareness. What am I bringing to the table? What are my reactions? What are my narratives when this happens, or when there's a lead up to what could be a meltdown? Because your brain's going to have reference points to this happening before. And so you can see little signs, and your default mechanism can be instantly to go into anger or panic or dysregulation because I don't know what to do. So the self-awareness of element is really looking in hindsight. I mean, all of this SUPER framework is looking in hindsight and looking at, if this was to happen again, what sort of things can I put in place? How can I help me? How can I help my child? So we're preventing these in the first place. And part of that is your self-reflection. So as well as looking at what you might be doing or thinking that causes your dysregulation, or how you're responding to your child, you also want to be looking at what does work. Have you experienced meltdowns with your child before where you have responded in a way that seems to reduce the intensity of that meltdown or the longevity of it? Because we don't just want to be looking at, what am I doing that I could be correcting or changing or improving? What am I already doing that I need to build on, that I can do more of? What am I saying? How am I feeling? How am I responding to my child? Or how is somebody else responding to my child that can really help me to know what to do in those moments, or to prevent those moments from happening in the first place? So that's the self-awareness element, looking at your narrative, looking at your behaviors, looking at your emotions, and learning how to regulate your own emotions through how you think, how you feel, and then the way that you express those emotions, or how you respond to your child's reactions. The U element of it is understanding. And this is where we're jumping into the world of the child, and we're really trying to make sense of what triggered that meltdown in the first place. So if you're looking at it in hindsight, you really want to kind of go, what was happening before? What was happening during it? What happened after it? What was going on in their body language, in their facial expressions, in their wording, what they were saying, or the noise that they were making if they're non-speaking? There's clues everywhere that helps us to really try to understand why that meltdown made sense, why that emotional overload got to that point. And this is why we need to have that self-awareness element, because it could very well be that something that you did intentionally, unintentionally, reactively, or non-reactively even contributed to your child's escalation, which means that if you were to change that, you could easily contribute to your child's non-escalation. But it may not necessarily be you either. So we have to get into that curiosity mode and really try to look at what were the circumstances going on, and even try to diarize that behavior so you can start to look for patterns in those meltdowns. Because very often parents are saying to me, I can't make sense of it. Like 1 minute they were fine, and then the next minute they were completely melting down, and I had no clue what it was. And that could very well be the case, even if you diarize the behavior, even if you do look for those patterns of behavior. In that moment, you may not know what that tantrum is about. And this is why it's important to look at it from a nervous system lens, because if your child is in full-blown meltdown, but you have no clue what the problem is in order to create any sort of solution, you're still working with that nervous system. You're still working on helping them feel safe, helping them to regulate their emotions, helping them to come back into this present moment, to look for those signs of safety, because in that moment, whatever's going on for them, they're not feeling that way. So we need to go, okay, nervous system response first, then we can figure out what happened. So out of that moment, using the super framework, we're looking at previous meltdowns, and we're looking at the series of meltdowns that you experience to try to make sense of why some of them exist, and looking at from that perspective of, what I was doing, what's going on in their environment, what's my understanding of my child, how does autism present in my child? And I spoke about autism in general, I think in one of my episodes. I can't remember which one. If you're watching this on video, I'll try to put it up on the screen, what episode it was that I spoke about autism in general and understanding how it presents, and so that you can look at some of the aspects of areas your child might be struggling with that may end up in a meltdown because they're struggling with it. So that could be executive functioning. It could be the way that they're handling a social situation or reflecting upon a social situation. It could be what's going on in their sensory environment. Any of these things can help you to understand that in this moment, maybe that challenge was causing them emotional overload that went into a meltdown. It could be the relationships they're having with their siblings, or an interaction that they're having with their sibling that's causing that meltdown. So we're really looking to understand. And the reason why we're wanting to understand is so that we can then start to implement the strategies that are going to support your child, which is where the next part of the framework comes in: prepare, plan, teach. Because if you understand the actual problem that's going on, and you've really kind of identified, what must my child be thinking or feeling to be behaving this way in this moment, and really make sense of it, then the solution is going to become a lot clearer. The goal is going to become a lot clearer. So you may need to spend quite a bit of time diarizing behavior, looking for clues, getting curious, asking your child after the event, getting information out of your child just in a casual way through conversation to understand their world and how they're perceiving their world. And so once you're able to understand and set some goals around how can I support my child, what do they need to learn, how can I help them prepare for situations that may be triggering for them, how can I help them to plan for those situations or learn coping strategies or give them resources to help them through certain challenging situations that may happen for them, or what skills do I need to teach them? Is it about social skills? Is it about understanding certain situations? Is it about mindset, where we're having to look at those stressful thinking lenses that they might be going through and helping them to get an accurate viewpoint of themselves, their self-worth, and the reality of the world? Now, I get that teaching side of things isn't straightforward and isn't a quick fix, but this is where we're needing to look from that super framework all the time when we're raising our kids, because we're constantly needing to go, okay, what are we needing to work on? What are we needing to help them with? So we've got so far self-awareness, your contribution, what's working, what's not working, understanding what's going on for them, getting a real sense of the pattern of their behavior, their thoughts, their feelings, how autism might present for them, or just their personality traits, what their strengths are can be also helpful for you in that understanding perspective, because you can use those strengths in the prepare, plan, teach aspect and help them to scaffold their skills and build on the skills that they already have in order to make situations a little bit easier. And then we jump into the environment and culture. Now, this is where we're now looking outside of the child for potential understandings of why those meltdowns make sense. So we're talking about sensory seeking or sensory avoidance, because it can be that they are quite sensitive to certain sounds or taste or touch or certain things that are happening for them that can be triggering them into that survival mode. We want to keep remembering that this is about survival here. It's not about defiance. The behavior may look like defiance. The behavior may look like a typical tantrum of, I don't want to do it, and therefore I'm digging my heels in and not doing it. So remember, this is why it's important to look at whether those cognitions are online, whether they're trying to look at that situation and change the situation deliberately. They're thinking straight. That's a tantrum. A meltdown, you will see that they will not be with you. You will see the difference in the way that they look or the way that they're acting. It'll be erratic. Their voice will be erratic. They won't be thinking straight or speaking in coherent sentences. And, that's where you know that is a meltdown. It is not defiant behavior. It is a nervous system on overload, and we're needing to help that nervous system to start to regulate. So the environment and the culture side of things is outside of that moment. We're looking at how was the experience of the external world for my child? How were they feeling in terms of physical sensations, in terms of seeing, hearing, touching, tasting, smelling? Could there have been something in their environment that they found was sent them into that survival mode, that I couldn't cope with how loud something was, or I couldn't cope with, the texture of something in my mouth, or, anything that was happening in the environment? The feeling of their clothing might have been something that was just so agitating that they couldn't deal with it anymore, and that was terrifying for them. And so their survival mechanism kicked in. So we have to remember, again, that the survival mechanism has kicked in because they don't feel safe, or because their survival mechanism has said, we need to do something in order to pursue pleasure and avoid pain. And it's not logical. It's just the best chance of survival we have is through this behavior. So the environment and the culture is about, how are they feeling within this environment? What is the languaging, the messaging that we're giving within this family environment, or within the environment that they're in when they're feeling this way? Are they feeling safe to be who they are? Are they feeling emotional safe? Are they feeling physically safe? So is the culture about pressure? Is the culture of that environment about, you have to be a certain way or act a certain way, or you can't respond this way, or you can't stim, or you can't regulate in the ways that you typically would? So are they free to be themselves? Is there positive messaging about their self-worth? Or are they feeling bad about themselves because of the way the culture is? So this is where we're really looking at that external environment and going, how does my child feel within this environment? Is the solution to their meltdowns partly because the environment is not very accommodating, and we either need to remove the child from that environment or limit the amount of time that they spend in that environment? Or number three, is there something that we can do to change that environment so that they can be more accommodating? Now, I get in saying that that the world isn't always going to accommodate for your child's needs. And I'm not at all saying that, that's going to be the only solution, is to change the environment to suit your child. Sometimes we do need coping mechanisms. We need to teach the child coping mechanisms to help them in certain situations to be able to cope when it isn't accommodating. But while you're in that process of teaching them all of these skills, you may need to accommodate your child and gently expose them to situations like that for a small period of time until that feels manageable, and then remove them and then go back and try again. So it's not as linear or black and white as put them in that situation and make them cope, or take them out of that situation completely. There has to be kind of a balance, and there has to be a nurturing of helping them to feel accommodated for, and also helping them to cope when there isn't any accommodations being made. So this is all under that environment and culture element of the super framework. And then the final one is relationships. Your child needs to feel safe. They need to feel like they're in a safe environment with a trusted individual, particularly when they're going through something challenging. Now, the easy definition of trauma is when the nervous system can't cope. They don't have the capacity or the resources to cope with that situation. And that's where they go into that fight, flight, or shutdown mode, because they're feeling traumatized in that moment. Now, the relationships that they have around them during that difficult, challenging situation they're facing creates an enormous buffer for how that child responds to that situation and how it affects them after that situation. So your relationship capital, which is the rapport that you build with your child, is going to be so important in helping to either prevent a meltdown or reduce the longevity of it. Now, when we say relationship capital, it's about you loving them, you liking them, you respecting them, the way you communicate with them whenever they're going through something challenging and whenever they're not. They need to know that the person they're with is safe, predictable in their love, able to work through challenges with them, is a safe person to help co-regulate with, and just somebody that respects me and likes me and is interested in me. So it's not just about building that relationship by working through challenges with them. It's also about having fun. It's about camaraderie. It's about joy. It's about friendliness. It's about connection outside of those moments, so that the challenging times don't become all that your relationship is about. It's not always about overcoming problems or finding solutions or fixing or changing or finding a therapy for or a fix for. It's about, hey, you know what? We're chilling out. We're having fun. We're enjoying each other's company. I'm interested in who you are and what you do. And, I want to be playful with you, and we have jokes together and we do things together. And that's got to form part of the whole relationship in order to build that relationship capital that's going to come in real handy when you are facing those challenging situations. So when you're looking at working with a meltdown or preventing a meltdown, we need to be taking all of those 5 areas into consideration and exploring what we can do in each one of those to support your child a little bit more. So my question for you in this episode, while you're waiting to move into the next episode, which is, what do we do in the moment? How do we help your child when they are in full-blown meltdown? Is which aspect of the super framework do you think needs work? Is it self-awareness, how I'm seeing things, what I'm bringing to the table, my own self-regulation, my own narrative that goes on when my child is escalating or in full-blown escalation? Am I looking at what's working? Am I looking at improving what's not working and really focusing on the me part of this equation? Is it the you part, where I'm really needing to understand the patterns of my child's behavior? Why does it make sense? Am I in curiosity? What must they be thinking to be feeling the way that they are? Am I understanding how autism presents for my child? or how their brain works, how they're thinking about things, what their understanding of things, where they might be confused about things? Am I looking at their strengths? Am I learning about how I can use those strengths in order to jump into prepare, plan, teach? Is the approach that you need to explore a little bit more really about strategies? Because very often when we're trying to support an autistic child, we're usually all about the strategies. What can I do to teach the child? What can I do to prepare them? What can I do to transition them? What can I do to help them? And this is great. We need those things. Absolutely. This is where your OTs come in, your speeches come in. This is where, our autism program comes in, where we're teaching you this whole super framework, but we do teach you how to scaffold things and how to, teach your child how to do things, how to transition, how to use visuals and stories, social stories and things like that. So, you're doing all of those things in the prepare, plan, teach, but it's not the whole picture. So we've got, self-awareness, understanding, prepare, plan, teach, environment and culture. Is this an area that maybe hasn't been looked at? What is the sensory profile of your child? What's going on when they're having those meltdowns, and does it have a sensory element to it? Or is it about the culture of your family? Does that need work? Do we need to change how we speak to each other? Do we need to change the inclusivity of our culture? Do we need to be talking more about self-worth? Do we need to be encouraging, worthiness or conversations about worthiness in our family? Do we need to be doing things in our family that are just a little bit more fun, and more connected within our family? And then the relationship side of things is, how is my relationship with my child? Or how is my child's relationships around them, particularly the people who might be around when they're having that meltdown? Or sometimes the child can be having that meltdown when it's with one safe parent. It's not even about the parent. It's about who they were with before they had that meltdown. So it could have been that they were in a classroom all day with a teacher who didn't get them, and they were masking all day. And then the meltdowns come from the buildup of everything that happened throughout that day. And then they're escalating with the parent that they feel the most safe with, because they're coming down from all of that. So again, it's not about you, but it is about you going, okay, I understand what's gone on here. I'm not going to personalize it. I'm not going to go into my own narrative about it. I just need to help my child to work on their nervous system because it's very dysregulated from the day. So I need to help them. So if you are that trusted person, it's about building up the best rapport you can with your child to help them to be able to regulate and co-regulate with you, to come down from that day, or come down from whatever it is that has triggered them. So have a think about that over the week. Obviously, our autism program is a 9-week program that helps parents to understand all of this: self-awareness, understanding, prepare, plan, teach, environment, culture, and relationships. And we're constantly looking at every aspect of autism from this place, where we're looking at anxiety, school avoidance, we're looking at meltdowns and shutdowns. We do 2 whole weeks on this, both out of the moment and in the moment stuff. And PDA, looking at how the super framework works and all of that. So if that's of interest to you, you jump onto parentalstresscenter.com to find out more. But this week, before we get into the following topic of what to do in the moment, I really do want you to reflect on which area of super that you may need to explore on. Have a great week. I really look forward to speaking to you next week on Meltdowns and Shutdowns Part 2. Are you looking for more parenting support? Visit the Parental Stress Center for expert-led programs designed to help you and your child to thrive. Find out more at parentalstresscenter.com.